Hello AmericansChannel. This video is made by free videos from Storyblocks, and these images and video we use just for explanation, and it's free use also.
Boy meets baby sister, then uncovers a heartbreaking secret. The day the family gathered at the hospital was meant to be celebratory. The small child looked forward to meeting his newborn sister, anticipation lighting up his innocent eyes. However, as the nurse brought in the swaddled baby, the boy's smile faded. As everyone stared at the little hands and feet, the boy took a step back and frowned. He abruptly exclaimed, "That's not my sister," sending chills down his father's spine. His father's rising discomfort foreshadows the harsh reality he is about to discover. The father's eyes widened as his son spoke. "What do you mean?" he inquired, attempting to keep his voice steady. The child only shook his head, lips squeezed together in a determined line. His father knelt and took his son's tiny hands in his. "Are you sure? Babies might appear different when they are born." Despite his composed demeanor, a knot of concern clenched in his chest. The father attempted to explain, "Son, babies change a lot after they are born. They can look different than we think." The youngster looked at the baby and shrugged, dubious. A nurse passing by overheard and enthusiastically said, "That's right. Newborns can surprise us all." The child nodded, but remained doubtful. The father hoped that this would end the matter, but doubt lingered in his mind. The boy's eyes remained fixated on the newborn as he continued to shake his head. "She wouldn't look like that," he said, his voice firm and steadfast. His parents exchanged concerned glances and strained grins. "Maybe you are simply weary," his mother said, ruffling his hair. The child did not move, folding his arms and looked away. The father's pulse pounded faster, his anxiety increasing with each passing second. Trying to ignore his son's statements as youthful fantasy, the parents concentrated on getting the infant established at home. "He's probably just feeling overwhelmed," the mother remarked, gathering their belongings. The father nodded, but he couldn't stop looking at his son. They packed their belongings, thanked the medical staff, and went home. The boy's remarks stayed with them, but they pushed him away, hoping for a new beginning. Despite their efforts to move on, the father's thoughts kept coming back to his son's bizarre revelation. As they settled the infant into her new crib, he became increasingly suspicious. "It's just nerves," he reminded himself, but the bad feeling persisted. He looked at his son, who was standing a few steps away, still bearing that serious expression on his face. At home, the child avoided interacting with the newborn, preferring to stay in his room or play outside. "Aren't you curious about your new sister?" his mother inquired. His response was curt. "That's not my sister." The boy's words rang in his father's head. He didn't understand why his normally inquiring youngster was so emphatic. What if he's correct? The father wondered, unease seeping back in. The father chose to show the youngster infant images of himself and his wife. Maybe this will help him realize the resemblance, he reasoned. He took out the family albums and summoned his son over. "Let's look at some images," he suggested, flipping through the pages. The boy stared intently, pointing out recognized people. "Do you see anything remarkable in these photos?" the father inquired, hoping for a breakthrough. As they continued to go through the family album, the child suddenly pointed to a photo of his father as a newborn. "Look at the birthmark," he exclaimed. The father nodded and touched a small, definite mark on his own forearm. "Everyone in our family has it," the child explained, his eyes wide. They ran to the newborn's cradle, their hearts racing as they looked for the birthmark. It was not there. The newborn lacked the unique birthmark that everyone in the family possessed. The father's heart plummeted as he examined her small arm. Perhaps it's simply not apparent yet, he reasoned, but uncertainty had taken hold. He looked into his son's eyes and saw the same concern reflected back at him. This was far from a coincidence, and he realized they couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was clearly amiss. They worked hard to maintain a normal routine, including cooking meals together and going on nighttime walks. But the father's thoughts kept returning to his son's statements and the missing birthmark. He lay awake at night, listening to every sound the baby made, looking for any indication that something was wrong. Despite his efforts to push the ideas aside, his fears persisted, nibbling at the back of his mind. Days passed, and the arrival of the newborn interrupted the family's routine. Feeding schedules, diaper changes, and sleepless nights were the new standard. The mother was fatigued, and the father found himself juggling work and household obligations. The child, who normally thrived on structure, appeared confused in the midst of the pandemonium. The newborn's arrival altered everything, and not always for the better, exacerbating the father's rising anxiety. As the days passed, the father began to discover minor discrepancies with the newborn. There were little aspects that didn't line up. Her hair color seemed slightly wrong, and her cry sounded unusually low. He kept his observations to himself, afraid he would sound insane. However, each irregularity added to his already growing uneasiness. The more he realized, the more concerned he felt about the situation. Unable to dismiss his fears, the father started to interrogate the hospital staff. He sought a nurse and shared his concerns. "I've observed some irregularities," he said nervously. The nurse smiled and comforted him. "It's normal for parents to feel this way. Newborns sometimes surprise us." Even the doctor who delivered the baby stated that everything was in order. Despite the reassurances, the father's uneasiness persisted. Meanwhile, the boy became increasingly withdrawn. He stopped playing with his toys and began experiencing nightmares. In the middle of the night, he would wake up shouting, "That's not my sister." His parents would run to reassure him, but the youngster was terrified. These incidents made his parents even more weary, and his father could sense his anxiousness increasing. The boy's grief only fueled his father's suspicions. The father's worries deprived him of sleep. He lay up at night, replaying his doubts in his mind. Should he follow his instinct or abandon it? He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Tossing and turning, he considered the implications of pressing the topic. Chasing shadows could go nowhere, but if his instincts were true, there was something malevolent at work. Finally, the father decided to talk to a family friend who is a pediatrician. They met in a neighborhood cafe. Over coffee, he expressed his concerns, describing the contradictions in the missing birthmark. "I know it sounds strange," he said, "but something doesn't feel right." The doctor listened closely and nodded as the father explained. "You're not insane," the doctor assured him. "It's usually a good idea to trust your intuition." During their chat, the father brought up the unique birthmark that everyone in their family shared. The doctor raised his eyebrows. "That's uncommon," he observed thoughtfully. The father went on, "Her hair color, her scream, there's so much that's different. It isn't adding up." The doctor leaned back and considered. "It could be nothing, but we should look into it," he suggested. "Sometimes the smallest details point to larger truths." The doctor advised a DNA test, which was a pretty unusual request. He stated, "A DNA test can put your mind at ease. If you have any reservations, give it some thought." The father paused, considering the advantages and cons. "It's obtrusive and may disturb my wife," he protested, but the doctor insisted. "It's better to be certain than to let doubt overwhelm you," he suggested. The concept of a test stuck with him. When the father returned home, he was still unclear whether he was overreacting. He grappled with the decision, unsure whether his concerns were valid or only a product of his mind. As he entered through the front door, he was greeted by his sleeping wife and newborn. He looked at their faces, feeling the weight of his indecision. He felt he needed to make a decision quickly as he considered his future steps. At home, the father observed how his wife and newborn were connecting. She would sing lullabies, feed her with care, and smile softly. Meanwhile, their son remained by, observing but not participating. "That is not my sister," he would say whenever asked. The father's anxiety grew with each declaration, chipping away at his tranquility. He could no longer disregard his son's statements. This continuous doubt was threatening the family's unity. Unable to overcome his developing doubts, the father made a difficult decision. He snuck out one evening and went to the neighborhood pharmacy. With his heart racing, he purchased a DNA test kit, thinking his wife would not notice. "I need to know," he assured himself, concealing the kit inside his jacket. The decision had been made. He would receive answers, regardless of the outcome. He believed that was a vital step to take. The father took advantage of an opportunity one day when his wife was napping. He slowly opened the DNA kit, his hands trembling. He gently swabbed the baby's mouth, trying not to wake her. He sealed the sample and concealed his actions from everyone. Later, he mailed it to the lab, a heavy weight resting on his chest. "Please, make this nothing," he silently implored, watching the mailbox swallow his concerns. Trying to distract himself, the father immersed himself in his work. He spent hours at his desk, thinking that the mundane activities would keep his thoughts busy. However, concerns of the DNA test kept him from concentrating. Meetings seemed unending, and his productivity plummeted. "Focus," he said to himself, but it was a losing battle. Every second apart from the infant exacerbated his nagging fears. Gradually, the father noticed minor changes in his wife's behavior. She seemed remote, and her laughter was less frequent. She regularly glanced at the baby, as if looking for something. "Is everything fine?" he inquired one evening. Her reaction was elusive, with a hazy smile and nod. These shifts increased his anxiety, and he wondered if she, too, detected anything. The home was becoming increasingly tense with each passing day. His relationship with his kid began to deteriorate under the weight of his doubts. "Why don't you play with your sister?" he'd ask, frustrated in his tone. "I told you, that is not my sister," the child would say, his eyes full of assurance. Their interactions were harsh, and his son's drive fueled his internal strife. They were slipping away, and the father's heart pained at the growing distance. Sensing his father's grief, the youngster became even more emphatic in his allegation. "Dad, please listen to me," he'd ask, tugging on his father's sleeve. The conviction in his youthful eyes could not be ignored. His father bent down to soothe him, but the boy's statements remained solid. "I am not making this up," he insisted. The son's perseverance just added to the father's perplexity, exacerbating the mystery surrounding the infant. As the days passed and the DNA results were still pending, the father became increasingly restless. The unknown gnawed at him, adding stress to his already hectic lifestyle. Finally, he resolved to return to the hospital, expecting to uncover some previously ignored information. He needed to fill in the blanks, to discover something that would either confirm or disprove his suspicions. He hoped the hospital had answers, even if they weren't what he was looking for. Back at the hospital, the father sought out the nurse who assisted with the delivery. "Can we chat privately?" he said, drawing her aside. "I've been having some misgivings," he admitted, detailing his fears. The nurse listened closely, her expression serious. "I don't remember anything remarkable," she responded after a moment of reflection. Desperate for a clue, the father insisted, "Please think hard. Even the tiniest detail matters." The nurse shook her head, then appeared to recall something. "There was a power outage during the delivery," she explained, her voice unsure. "It disrupted some of our equipment for a few minutes." The father's eyes expanded. "Could that have caused any mix-ups?" he inquired urgently. The nurse shrugged. "It's unlikely, but not impossible." This fresh piece of knowledge exacerbated his mounting discomfort. The mystery worsened. The father couldn't overcome the uncomfortable sensation he had as he left the hospital. The details of the power outage lingered in his thoughts like a broken record. Could that have produced a mix-up? He mused, taking cautious and deliberate steps. He glanced at his wife and newborn, who were blissfully ignorant of his distress. As they headed to the car, the father's heart was full with doubt. The father's pursuit for answers began to take its toll on his marriage. Arguments sprang up during dinner, with minor disagreements developing into yelling battles. "Why can't you just let it go?" his wife said, her face filled with irritation. "I need to know the truth," he replied, his voice rising. Their previously pleasant home was now fraught with anxiety. Trust was fading, pulling them apart. "Why can't you support our newborn instead of pursuing these ridiculous doubts?" his wife screamed, her eyes welling up. She was frustrated because she felt he was abandoning their family in favor of his wacky notions. The infant sobbed in the background, contributing to the turmoil. "You're overly paranoid," she replied, shaking her head. The father felt a pang of shame but stayed determined. He realized he couldn't ignore his gut feelings. Feeling alienated, the father decided to tell a close friend. He discussed his concerns about coffee, going into depth. "I believe something is wrong, but I can't put my finger on it," he said. His guy listened intently and nodded. "I'll help you investigate," the friend said, a determined expression on his face. The father sensed a ray of optimism. He now had someone on his side. The father and his companion combed through hospital records and logistics, hoping to find something. They spent hours going through paperwork, talking to medical workers, and checking surveillance footage. "There has to be something," the father mumbled, his frustration mounting. However, their efforts were in vain. Every lead appeared to end in a dead end. Despite their thorough search, they came up empty-handed, leaving the father more concerned than before. Despite their attempts, the father couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was wrong. He lay up at night, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. What if we missed something? He worried. His friend's reassurances did little to ease his anxiety. The discomfort gnawed at him, refusing to be ignored. He knew he needed to keep looking for solutions, no matter how difficult they appeared to be. The father's acquaintance suggested that they chat with other parents who had babies in the hospital at the same time. "Perhaps someone else observed anything unusual," he replied. They prepared a list of people from hospital data and scheduled informal encounters. "It's worth a shot," the father agreed, hoping that this fresh strategy might produce results. Collecting information from others seems like the reasonable next step. They held informal gatherings under the guise of a new parents' club to gather information. At these gatherings, the father started polite talks, carefully directing them toward the hospital experience. "Did you observe anything unusual?" he would inquire nonchalantly. Most shook their heads dismissively while telling cheery baby stories. Despite the lighthearted tone, the father was on high alert, looking for any clues that could help solve the mystery. During these discussions, the father learned about another couple whose infant appeared to lack familial characteristics. "We're just a little perplexed," the mother admitted, displaying a hint of worry. "Our baby also looks different than we imagined." This detail struck a chord with the dad. He exchanged contact information, promising to offer any valuable information. This new link felt like a step toward solving the puzzle. The details of the other couple's concerns struck a chord, so they agreed to share information for further investigation. They met more regularly to share their observations and theories. "Have you seen any other inconsistencies?" the father inquired. Just minor details, but enough to make us question, the other father responded. This joint accord revived the father's feeling of purpose. They were determined to discover answers. The father began to detect a plausible pattern, but felt stuck in the absence of specific evidence. He examined the baby, comparing her characteristics to his and his wife's. The alterations were slight but distinct. He couldn't reject his son's assertion and the lack of a marking. The more he analyzed, the more certain he grew. However, without substantial evidence, he felt powerless, trapped in a web of doubt and mistrust. The wait for the DNA results grew intolerable, adding to the father's anxiety. Every day seemed like an eternity, with each passing hour weighing heavily on his mind. He attempted to concentrate on work, but his mind kept wandering back to the possible consequence. The uncertainty gnawed at him, influencing his attitude and interactions with his family. He knew the results would provide answers, but the wait was excruciating. Just before the DNA results were due, the father decided to have an open chat with his kid. He saw him playing peacefully in his room and sat down next to him. "Buddy, I need to understand why you think this baby isn't your sister," he stated quietly. His boy looked up, his eyes full of determination. "Dad, it's something I feel. She is just different." The father listened intently, hoping to find clarification. Determined to learn the truth, the father urged his son to explain why he was so certain the infant wasn't his sister. "Could you tell me more, buddy? What makes you so certain?" he inquired, his tone serious yet kind. The boy thought for a bit before speaking. "It's not just how she looks, father. There's something else, which I see in my dreams." The father leaned in, curious. The boy described his reoccurring dream in full. "I see a different baby, with a family birthmark and eyes that look like yours and Mom's," he told me. The father listened closely, feeling a shiver down his spine. The boy's account was vivid, almost overly thorough for his early age. "Are you sure it's just a dream?" the father inquired, his tone tinged with anxiety. "Yes, Dad," the youngster said firmly. The father listened closely and resolved to take his son's intuition more seriously. His son's belief in the weird dream carried more weight than he had anticipated. He recognized that disregarding the boy's feelings could be a mistake. "All right, buddy, I believe you," he responded, holding his son. He thought it was time to act on this knowledge, regardless of how unusual it appeared. The stakes were too enormous to be ignored. The father braced himself for whatever the DNA findings would reveal. He faced his wife, describing his activities and the efforts he'd taken to find out the truth. "I need to do this, for all of us," he replied, presenting her the DNA test receipt. She looked dejected, but she understood his want for clarity. "I hope the results prove she's ours," she added gently, a worried expression on her face. The woman remained sad, but she hoped that the DNA results would prove that the baby was theirs. She spent more time with the newborn, scrutinizing every detail and looking for any familial qualities she may have overlooked. "I don't see any birthmark," she told her husband, tears in her eyes. Despite her anxieties, she attempted to remain hopeful, trusting in the link she had with the infant. The DNA results had arrived, and the father read them with shaky hands. As he opened the package, his heart hammered, and each second seemed to last forever. His wife waited nearby, desperation and hope clashing in her eyes. "What does it say?" she questioned, her voice scarcely audible. The anxiety in the room was tangible, as everyone held their breath in anticipation of the news that would change everything. The test verified his darkest fears. The infant had no biological ties to him or his wife. The paper trembled in his hands as he reread the results, hoping he had made an error. "This can't be right," he said, glancing at his wife, who was now crying. "What should we do now?" she questioned, her voice breaking. The father was overcome with wrath, uncertainty, and despair. The father marched into the hospital, his determination clear in every step. He asked to speak with the hospital administration immediately. "I need answers," he repeated, rage boiling beneath the surface. The staff swiftly scheduled a meeting, sensing his anxiousness. In the administrator's office, the father presented the DNA results and expressed his concerns. "We need to investigate thoroughly," he insisted, his voice hard but controlled. The hospital administrator listened attentively, nodding as the story progressed. "We will get to the bottom of this," he told him, launching an internal investigation. A few tense days later, the investigation yielded a surprising revelation. During a power outage, the nursery encountered a mix-up. One of the babies was mislabeled, the administrator confessed, her face pallid. The father's heart sunk. The nightmare was only starting. The nurse who initially dismissed the power outage as insignificant was summoned to the office. Her face turned pale as she listened to the administrator explain the findings. "I never thought," she began, her voice filled with guilt. "I should have double-checked everything." The father studied her intently, his fury mixed with empathy. She was humiliated by the blunder, but it was too late to apologize. Action was required. The hospital promptly contacted the correct biological parents of both babies involved in the mix-up. Emotions ran high as phone calls and meetings were scheduled. The father and his wife waited anxiously, their hearts heavy with expectation. Finally, the actual parents came. The room was filled with tears and shaky hands, as both families recognized the gravity of the situation. An emotional reunion was unavoidable. The procedure of swapping newborns was traumatic. Both families battled with the prospect of leaving the infant they had cared for and loved. The room was filled with weeping and soothing words. "We'll always remember you," the father said softly to the baby he had mistaken for his daughter. The other parents held their own children, similarly distraught. The babies were lovingly exchanged, with each family grieving the great loss. Finally, the father held his real daughter for the first time. His eyes welled up with tears as he embraced her small body. "Hello, honey," he said quietly, his voice cracking. He felt a mix of grief over the weeks they had lost and comfort that he was holding his own daughter. His wife gathered close and hugged him tightly. Despite the overwhelming feelings, there was a glimmer of optimism. The family began the arduous process of recuperating and adapting to their new circumstances. They redesigned the nursery, established new rituals, and prioritized connecting with their genuine daughter. The small youngster, who had recognized the truth from the start, appeared more relaxed. "Welcome, sister," he whispered tenderly, holding her tiny hand. Every day was a step closer to recovery, yet the trip was far from easy. Both families agreed to stay in touch, recognizing the unique kinship formed during the ordeal. They scheduled regular visits to ensure the newborns knew the story of their first few weeks. "We are stronger together," the mother remarked, clutching the other mother's hand. Families shared meals, exchanged parenting advice, and developed a supportive group. Their connection was based on empathy and mutual understanding, and they helped one another heal. Working together, both families aimed to ensure a smooth transition for the newborns. They consulted pediatricians, went to counseling sessions, and relied on one another for emotional support. "What counts most is the baby's well-being," the father said at one of their group meetings. The support of both families made the process less scary, and the joint aim of their children's happiness kept them together and strong. The father frequently reflected on the entire incident, emphasizing the value of trust and intuition. "Trusting your instincts can be important," he reflected, recalling his son's unflinching assurance. He recognized how important it was to act on such feelings, despite any doubts or anxieties. This event reaffirmed his conviction in the power of intuition, which influenced how he dealt with life's obstacles in the future. They had endured and become stronger. The father reminisced on the entire voyage, feeling overwhelmed with thankfulness for his son. The boy's unrelenting perseverance brought them to the truth. "He's wiser than I ever expected," the father reflected, delighted at his son's resolve. Their friendship had become deeper due to their shared experience. The father realized he owed his kid a lot, for it was his persistence that had solved the problem. The father also praised his friend's constant support, without which he would not have been able to handle the probe. "I could not have done it alone," he revealed over a coffee meeting. Their advice and presence had helped to piece together the unsettling puzzle. The friends had showed up, offering their homes as safe havens and giving an ear. This support network had made a huge difference. After the ordeal, the family focused on rebuilding their relationships. They spent more time together, rediscovering mutual interests and establishing new habits. "Let's make the most of every minute," the mother remarked, organizing family outings and game nights. The living room, previously tense, was now filled with laughter and happiness. The parents and the young boy collaborated to provide a supportive atmosphere for their genuine daughter. During the event, the father developed a greater appreciation for his family's tenacity. "We've been through so much, yet we've come out stronger," he reflected, seeing his wife and children connect. Their capacity to deal with the mental and physical upheaval impressed him. The family's united strength and solidarity inspired pride. They had tackled hardship head-on, emerging stronger and more linked than ever before. The family began to accept what had happened and chose to go on. "We can't alter the past, but we can create the future," the mother murmured, hugging her daughter. They had faced a terrible truth and emerged stronger. With each passing day, memories of doubt and confusion receded, giving way to optimism and eagerness. They optimistically envisioned a happier future together. Although the voyage was tough, it brought them closer in unexpected ways. Late-night chats and shared tears had enriched their understanding and strengthened their bond. "We've learned a lot about each other," the father said, his wife nodding in agreement. The catastrophe had exposed their essential qualities and fostered newfound unity. During this difficult time, they formed an unbreakable relationship that would withstand any future adversity. The father's determination to discover the truth greatly improved his bond with his son. "You were correct from the beginning," he assured his son, who smiled triumphantly. Their communication had improved, and they now had an unspoken understanding. The father's respect for his son's intuition grew, resulting in a stronger bond. "We're a team," the father told his son, clasping his hand. This experience had bonded their lives even more securely. As a result of everything that occurred, the youngster felt validated and closer to his family. "I knew it all along," he said quietly one night, his father alongside him. His feelings were no longer ignored, and he felt understood and valued. His previously stern manner relaxed, and he became more involved with the family. The approval gave him a sense of belonging and increased his confidence in sharing his opinions. Together, the family dealt with the intricacies of their position, emerging stronger and more united. They honestly addressed their emotions, which helped the healing process. "We'll tackle anything together," the mother stated, her voice filled with resolve. Each day brought new problems, but their mutual support made them more bearable. The father no longer felt alone, as he shared tasks and built trust throughout the family. Unity became their newfound power. The family's experience proved the power of love and perseverance in overcoming hardship. "We did it together," the father stated during a family dinner, lifting a glass in appreciation. Their adventure served as a reminder that being together can make a difference, even during the most difficult moments. They celebrated tiny wins and treasured their friendship. The story they lived would now serve as inspiration, demonstrating that with love and determination, any difficulty can be conquered.